this particular deficit-cutting group ain't quite like some of the others. The left-leaning demos with a report that forbids any spending cuts until unemployment drops below 6%. It is closer to 10% right now. How does it plan to slash those piling deficits in the meantime? Let's ask Heather McGhee of Demos. Heather, how do you do it?
Well, we take at our Fiscal Security Project, we take a very proactive approach that says that the best way to reduce the deficit is to get Americans back to work. That means immediate spending on job creation in the short term. You're absolutely right, Neil. We say that if we do this austerity program where we're slashing spending while, of course, still keeping tax cuts for the wealthy for some reason, we really risk harming our fragile recovery. We risk another double-dip recession. And so we say that you keep the pressure on the gas in the economy, which right now is federal spending, and increase it actually in the short term.
So sort of double down, because there are a lot of people, Heather, would look at this and say, we've been doing plenty of spending, plenty of stimulus, plenty of all that. And this is what it's wrong. So you're saying, well, more money would solve it?
Well, actually, we haven't. I mean, you can even look at a conservative economist like Martin Feldstein, who was Reagan's chief economist. This is not exactly a liberal. He said, and he agrees with a Goldman Sachs economist as well as more progressive economists who say that the problem with the stimulus was actually that it wasn't big enough. We should have been able to say to the American people right at the beginning of this Great Recession, you know, the economy is like a patient on the table right now, and it may take a couple of jolts in order to really get that patient back up and moving.
Well, how many more jolts? In other words, I know your real prescription occurs in the outer years, closer and beyond 2016. But for those who want to see us move in the right direction, get these deficits under control, I think your group freely acknowledges they're going to get worse before they get better. But that's what worries folks, right?
If we cut the deficits immediately, we're actually going to be prolonging our fiscal imbalances, because the reason why we're in this deficit problem right now, the vast majority is because of a recession. So if we take our eye off the ball, not only do we imperil the ability to actually get out of the deficit in the long term, but Neil, there are 15 million Americans in this country who are out of work through no fault of their own.
But we've done a lot of spending, right? We've done a lot of spending. And for the new jobs that have been created or saved, difficult math to prove, we're still down a net 3 million plus jobs since this administration took over. So how is doing more of the same not akin to digging a deeper ditch?
I think that there's a very good case to be made that the most powerful way for us to get Americans back to work is short-term deficit spending. For example, there's a lot of things that we didn't do in the stimulus package.
But yours won't be short-term, right, Heather? Yours won't be short-term at all.
It won't be short-term until the American economy recovers. I don't think that we should rest here in Washington until the American people who want a job can find one. And if that means that we need to directly put Americans back to work, if that means that we need to do more spending on rebuilding Americans' roads and bridges and schools, then I think that we have to do that.
But my point, Heather, is whatever the amount, and obviously not enough for you, if that hasn't been the charm, and a lot of businesses saying they're reluctant to spend and to hire workers in this environment because they're fearful of their taxes going up, more regulations, a big health care bill to pay for. What would encourage them to take the burden off the government to hire construction types to build more roads and bridges or whatever?
I think that we need to be asking one simple question about every single economic policy decision we make. And I think this is something, Neil, that you probably would agree with, which is that, is this going to help working and middle-class Americans achieve their dreams? Is this going to build the country that we have all been proud of?
Fair enough, Heather. Then how is raising taxes on businesses going to achieve anyone's dreams if they're the folks ultimately
let's take for example one of the business sectors that we're talking about increasing revenue from, the Wall Street speculation that does nothing to build the real economy, and in fact actually contributed to crashing the real economy.
Are you equating the wealthy with all Wall Streeters? So the millionaires and billionaires with
I'm talking about the corporate. You said that we were raising taxes on businesses. I was saying that in fact we're not going to be raising taxes on the vast majority of American businesses. We do in our plan have a Wall Street traders tax that.
Well, you're raising taxes on the upper income. You're raising taxes on capital gains. You're raising taxes on dividends.
Absolutely, because
pretty soon you're going to have a 4% Medicare surtax. Even liberals within your own party have been saying, in this environment, while some of them share your views that they should pay more, they're saying not now, not in this environment.
I think that we need to, in this country, be rewarding work just as much as we are wealth. Right now, hedge fund managers and executives who get the most of their money from what happens in the stock market are actually taxed at a lower rate than average working Americans who depend on their paychecks for day-to-day living. That's just simply not the American values that I think that we share.
Would you be for raising all these other taxes and the Bush taxes and all in this environment? That's what I'm asking. Let's say you're right about that. You and I could quibble about some of the details. But when so many in your party are saying this is not the time to be raising taxes on anyone, would you agree that this is not the time to be doing
So our plan keeps with the Obama policy, which says that we extend the Bush tax cuts for the vast majority of the American people, but let them expire on the top 2%, millionaires and billionaires.
And you think that is going to wait a minute? You think that is going to eventually get these budgets in balance by leaving it pretty much at the hands of the rich to do it?
Well, here's my question, Neil. What's the most urgent concern for you? You say it's the deficits, but you're also saying that we should keep the tax increases that did nothing for the tax cuts that did
Heather,
nothing for job creation.
I will tell you this. I'm not an Einstein, but I've never seen a tax hike that's provided a job for anyone, ever, ever.
When we had much higher tax rates, if you go back into the post-war period, even just going into Clinton, we had much more broadly shared economic growth. We
also had an internet boom. We had a NASDAQ boom. We had an artificial boom. We can quibble over history. So let me ask you this. But would you entertain the possibility that higher taxes aren't going to alone get you there?
Absolutely not. That's why we say that there is about $1 trillion over the next decade that we can zero in on in the defense budget, for example. We need to be investing in America again.
In no other budget. Social Security, I think you lap it on higher FICA taxes and curtailing benefits for the well-to-do. Right?
Do you know how much the 401k balance is for the average American? That's why we don't touch Social Security, because actually going forward, that $14,000, which is what Social Security is the average benefit,
where's the pain in your
enough.
plan outside of the greedy, good old SOB fat cats? Where's the pain?
I think we need to be looking. I think that, first of all, I think defense cuts are going to be very painful. They're going to require a lot of shared sacrifice across this country. But I think working and middle-class Americans have actually had enough pain, and that we need to be talking about how we can get some gain going to the people who work for a living.
So the way to get the gain is to inflict the pain on whoever it is, a few percentage or more of the people who you think can have it inflicted on, and then you'll get a magic result.
We think that there's not at all magic. In fact, it's a nearly 100 and something page report that goes into a lot of detail about how we can close the budget deficit in the short term, invest in America for the long term, rebuild our middle class. And we think that if we invest in America again, we are actually going to have much broader gains for everyone across the economic spectrum.
All right, Heather McGhee, regardless, very good having you on. Thank you very much.